Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is January 7, 2024. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Noah Diamond. Where in the heck you calling in from, Noah?
New York City, Jerry. It's a pleasure to talk to you too.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
I think I'd say it's a tie. The beautiful answer is love. Love is very arguably the best and most important thing. And I think a less beautiful but equally valid answer is luck.
Love and luck.
Yep.
Wow. I used to ask this question. Tell me the philosophy of your life in 3 words, all beginning with the same letter. Okay, I'll veer from the script and pull out an old dusty one. What would be the other L word?
What an interesting question. Okay. Love, luck, and there must be a third L word that sums up my philosophy. All the L words that are occurring to me are very off the target. I'm thinking liverwurst. No.
Liverwurst.
In 3 days, I'll be going about my business and an L word will pop into my head and I'll say, that's it. Laughter. Why don't we go with laughter?
That was an easy one. I was gonna actually feed it to you. Thank you.
Thank goodness I thought of that. Yes, laughter.
We could be sharing a liverwurst sandwich right now.
And laughing about it.
Yeah, over Zoom. You know, they have 3D printers now where you can feed in the liver. Okay, so what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Favorite form of information. I love a good song lyric.
Nice. That is beautiful. Why do you think humans collect information?
I guess many reasons. Often unconsciously on our way to achieving other things, because it's necessary to get something we want.
Do you think this need or want to collect and gather information is more innate or more invented?
More innate, but it can be nurtured.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
I would say thoughts certainly can lead to emotions. I'm not sure if they create them.
Yeah. It's good, Noah, because it's me and you versus the wording on the question. I'm all for you saying, I would use a different verb there or a different noun. Rewording the question's really important to me. And even saying, I don't know or I can't answer that is totally valid too. Don't feel I'm trying to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
There's that great line. I'm not sure what it's from or who said it, but it's how do I know what I think till I hear what I say?
Till I hear what I say. I bet you that's on my list here.
That's from something, but I'm not sure how to attribute it. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but it's also a little bit glib, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
to some extent, maybe we do figure out how we feel about things by listening to ourselves speak spontaneously. But I think most of the time we probably know how we feel about things without having to think about it a lot.
That's good. A couple things. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it.
Uh-huh.
But you touched on the bumper sticker on a car on my street. It says, don't believe everything you think.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And the guy I interviewed the other day, we came up with, don't believe everything you feel.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a funny thing. I think we tend to more believe what we feel than what we think. And
Yeah.
the thing is, anyways, we'll get into this. Can humans think without language?
Yes. Although it's difficult, or language certainly helps with thoughts of any complexity. But sure, we can do some thinking without language.
Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. No, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I wish the answer was I dance. That would be the nice answer, but it's not really what I do.
I like that.
Uh,
I dance.
yeah, I wish I could say that, but no, I very little of my communication is actually done through dancing. I guess the answer would be some form of visual communication. And
Yeah.
although I am very much a word person, I also have this visual side, and um, a thousand pictures are worth a thousand words.
Hello. But what you said really tapped into this cliche I love to repeat. If you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it.
Yeah.
And it really brought back this visual. My dad always wanted to be like, Fred Astaire. And I got this cheesy footage of him like tap dancing, like fake tap dancing. And it's one of the greatest memories because the beauty of dance is you don't have to know how to dance well. I mean, I'm a clunky white boy dancing, and I know it, but it doesn't matter. Dance is free form. I had a partner in my band who was blind since birth, and he danced. He never saw anyone dance. So when he danced, it was like you had to clear the chairs away. Like and it was like, where did he get this? How do we know how to dance? Because we've watched Fred Astaire. We've watched, even my favorite is Buster Keaton knew how to turn a stumble into a dance.
Yeah, well, he was a physical genius. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of physical grace and inventiveness it's every bit as ineffable as a great literary gift. Maybe even more so because it's
Oh,
harder to
wow.
imagine learning it.
Yeah.
Yes,
But,
that
but
is.
it is great that you says I wish I could dance. You can dance.
Oh, a little, yeah. I mean, as a performer, I've done a fair amount of musical theater,
Yeah.
but I tend to be the problem child from the choreographer's point of view. They always say you don't have to, like just what you just said, you don't have to be good at dancing. You just have to be uninhibited and enjoy it. And I would always say, well, yes, but I'm inhibited and I don't enjoy it. That's exactly the problem.
I'm not inhabited by the great dancers. But Sammy Wasson writes all these great books on film people, and he wrote in his Fosse book, Fosse's dancers acted like they were dancing. They
Hmm.
they like made I forgot the word. I think the verb is act, but they didn't dance. They acted like they were dancing.
That's interesting. Yeah, he's the equivalent, the choreographer equivalent of a very mannered author, like a prose stylist. Yes, very self-conscious dancing.
Yeah. Um, your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I guess more feeling, if I had to say one has the edge.
Yeah. That's what 80% of people say. And it's interesting because we invented these two words and we think we can separate it, but can't really separate them. But I love Bridget Bardot said, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck.
Right. Well, that's being uninhibited.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do both of those things, and I take the point that maybe they're not separate things so much. Feeling is a kind of thinking, and vice versa.
But
But
we invented words and we think we can separate, when you're crying, you don't think you're thinking.
right. Also, the word thinking, it implies rational, reasoned thinking, but it wouldn't necessarily be that.
Really good. No, that's what words evoke more than their meaning. They imply. I study etymology deeply, and it's like my favorite is when they say, some guy just typed this up and got hired to be an etymology guy. It's all made up. We don't know where words came from. All the
Mhm.
cool words came from the back alleys of England by the hoodlums. But when it says in the etymological breakdown of word, it says of unknown origin. It's like every word is of unknown origin. It's just some guys came along and said this is where this word came from. you know.
Yeah.
Two questions from Alan Turing in 1950s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Oh, I'll say no. The word soul, I get I don't know what it means. Soul. It seems like it's a word for the absence of understanding. Um, Sometimes it's a useful word when we're talking about the parts of life that we don't fully understand. But I wouldn't attribute any specific activities or qualities to the soul. I think it's a poetic word. Thinking is a function of um, the mind, the brain. Those words seem more accurate to me.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Oh, yes, I suppose they can. Maybe they have their own ways of thinking. I think there are kinds of thinking that they don't seem to be very good at yet, uh, which is probably good news. But sure, machines can think, they can calculate and reason, and some kinds of thought they're better at than we
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
are. Probably the right answer is happiness. Although I think this is another. They're often the same thing. But I think I would be more conscious of like I'm pursuing happiness than meaning. You know.
Because I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he
Yeah.
says, meaning doesn't, meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't tend to last.
Okay. Well, that defines happiness as thrills, more or less, a fleeting
Yeah.
positive feeling, an endorphin rush. But I don't know. There's a maybe a larger and deeper way to define happiness that is closer to the definition of meaning.
It's good. Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, well, in my case, probably light. Although some of those machines that can, process numbers or information at a speed we can't even think of, maybe they could beat light.
Yeah. Does the brain more create consciousness or detect it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away, and are we more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Oh boy, that is a good question. I would, I guess, hmm, the optimistic answer, and I'll choose the more optimistic answer since it feels like a bit of a toss up to me, is that maybe we create it, or maybe the brain, if it doesn't create consciousness, it fills in so many blanks, and paints the picture of the world that we think of as our consciousness, that it's closer to being creative.
Beautiful. I like that verb paint. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rayner responded, said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Boy, you can't tear down the master's house using the master's tools. Um, I wonder, what new tool do you suggest? I'll see if I find my way to an answer to that while questioning the premise of the original question. I mean, maybe the master's tools are the very thing to tear down the master's house with.
Yeah.
You know, that makes a certain amount of sense to me. Speak the language of the government you're trying to overthrow. Um, what new tool would you recommend? I'm not going to say AI.
Yeah. Well, I'd say your tool is using the master's language.
Yeah.
Because see, when you put the questions in the context you want, just because I open them with a cute quote, you don't even have to apply the quote. The basic question is, what tool do you gravitate towards? And then you can apply the word new if you want, and you can apply the quote I said too. But again, we'll move on. But this is good because you're listening. Noah, you're a good listener. What new toy do you suggest?
Oh, any musical instrument or any kind of art supplies, anything you would use to express or create something.
That's great. I used to ask if you were on a desert island and you could have one modern convenience. I learned from a couple people. It'd be a glass bottom boat, and in the boat there would be a music room and an art supply room.
That's a good complicated answer. Yes.
That's like you got everything there: music instruments and art supplies. Man, we're in heaven.
Yeah, that's what you need.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Time, time and energy and money, and will I have enough of those things to do the things I want to do?
McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Noah, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Hmm. Um, that's interesting. Well, you have to be open to things, don't you? I mean, I mean, I know I have a huge capacity to reject obvious truths that are inconvenient for me, in one way or another. You have to kind of hopefully you begin to understand that you're doing that and that you're actually not doing yourself any favors uh, by laboring under delusions, but it is very easy to paint your picture the way you want it and ignore what doesn't fit. I think one of the things that shakes you out of that is it's also important to have meaningful relationships with other people,
Yeah,
and usually in the light of friendship in its many forms and family in its many forms, you start to realize there's really only a certain amount of bullshit people are going to put up with.
that's it. Do artists have moral obligation?
Oh, that's interesting. I think people have moral obligations, to treat each other decently and be kind and sensitive and things like that. But if the question is, do artists have a moral obligation to create art? I don't know. I'm not sure they do. It's tempting to say yes, and yes feels like the right answer, but I don't know. I've known real examples of artists who had incredible abilities that they really just felt either finished with or not interested in pursuing for any number of personal reasons. And faced with a real person in that situation, I feel like it's not, it's completely up to you whether you want to do that. Being an artist, like, in whatever your approach to being an artist is it's a very costly thing, in terms of the rest of your life. And no, I don't feel comfortable telling someone you must spend your life doing this thing just because
Yeah,
you're good at it. Although it is sad to think of,
yeah,
specific artists who you wish would be more productive because you love their work so much.
yeah. Well, one artist said, art is making your problems other people's problems.
Yeah.
Any comment?
Yeah, that's good. It isn't always that, but it certainly can be that. Art is making your problems other people's problems. You could flip that around too. It would be just as true, wouldn't it? Art is making other people's problems your problems.
Hello, that no one's ever done that. I like that.
Because it's an empathy creator.
Yeah, very good, Noah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I hope I'm more afraid of old ideas, but I'm probably more afraid of new ideas. That's one of those things you try not to be too much of. You don't want to be a grumpy old naysayer, but it's you have to work pretty hard to not feel threatened by what's new and unusual, and to be accepting and feel like whatever about the world changes, there'll still be room for me in it, and I can relax and accept new ideas.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I don't know about the earliest memory, but a very early memory that I'm not sure I can get any earlier than this is when I was 2 years old. I received as a birthday gift from a family friend when I turned two. A friend of the family gave me a bunch of puppets, Muppet puppets,
Yeah.
Kermit, Piggy, and Fozzie.
Yeah.
No, I think it was Kermit, Piggy, and Animal. That's what it was. And I knew Kermit from Sesame Street, but I hadn't seen the Muppet Show yet, so I didn't know who the other two were, and I was struggling to like figure out what the relationship was between these physical objects that I had and the characters I had seen on TV. And I was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s. It was not as video heavy a world as we live in now. Um, anyway, memories of staring at those puppets and trying to figure out, like, is this Oscar? Why isn't he green? Why does he have a nose? Why does this puppet have a nose? Is a very early thought. Another thing I remember about being a little kid and a baby, which is not pleasant, is having ear infections. I had ear infections a lot when I was a little kid, and I remember my ear just hurting so much that I was just crying and couldn't get through the next second of an ear infection.
Wow. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's both. Let's say it's more a blessing.
Beautiful. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Oh, wow. The obvious answer is my parents, but that's the answer. My mother's empathy and humanism, and my father's humor and voice were and remain major influences. Outs
Beautiful.
and outside of my immediate family, I suppose it was a teacher. I guess the first teacher who really kind of um, opened doors for me was a music and art teacher in the first elementary school I went to, Mrs. Downing. I grew up in a very rural place, or spent the first part of my childhood in a very rural place in Connecticut. And Mrs. Downing was sort of the first bohemian I ever met, the first person I ever knew who had a completely self-created image. She was an artist. She was the first artist I spent time with.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Well, not strictly. We're Jewish, and they always kind of made Judaism available to my siblings and me without really insisting on it. We would just kind of nod in the direction of the major holidays. We didn't go to synagogue or anything like that, but we had relatives, my great aunt and uncle, who were extremely religious. And we spent a lot of time with them. So we had through them this, the door was always open to Judaism. And we all, at some point, my siblings and I, decided to give Hebrew school a try and see if we liked it. And my parents were always made it clear, like, this is available to you, but you don't have to. I mean, they really was the ideal. They made religion available without making it a requirement.
Nice.
So we really got to choose. I gave it a try for a while and decided religion isn't my thing. But I had a mostly pleasant sort of family connection with Judaism when I was a kid.
Do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, I don't think God exists, and I think um, the possibility of anybody saying anything to me after I die that I will hear and understand, that would already be such thrilling good news. I mean, if I at some point know that I'm dead and anybody is saying anything to me that I can perceive, I'll be very surprised and very happy about that. If you combine that with the, to me, very surprising revelation that there is a God, or that there is a God who like speaks to us and has, you know, has a human enough form that we can communicate with God in a way that we could understand. Well, what would I want that God to say to me after I die? Um, I guess maybe something like, everything's going to be fine from here on. All the hard stuff is behind you. That was the bad part. You
Yeah.
know, now everything's great. We have a beautiful apartment for you.
Or Groucho line, like the one I learned yesterday from an experimental filmmaker, which I didn't even know. I love it, and it's not Groucho, but it's attributed to him often. What have future generations ever done for me?
Yeah.
That is a classic. But Krasner nailed it. He said, in what you were talking about, he says, "I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives."
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's kind of one of those things like, maybe, I mean, it doesn't sound to me like something I would feel very strongly convicted about, but
Yeah,
it also doesn't seem like it does me that much good,
yeah,
because it, the continuation of my own consciousness, and I mean, it gets to be a Woody Allen joke after a while, my own consciousness and my own apartment, that's what I'd like to live on in my apartment.
that's good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I guess evil people exist. I would be hesitant to identify evil as like a consciousness, a force that's out there trying to get us. I don't think evil is a spiritual thing that's out there that possesses people. And I think most people who do evil things are probably not completely evil themselves. They are, like most of us, they're trying to get their needs met, and they're missing they're missing the piece of their moral architecture that tells us not to, hurt other people. But but I suppose there probably are. Well, there definitely are people who are simply malicious, and but
Yeah.
I would say those would be evil people.
The real hidden question, though, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, those are all very compelling thoughts. If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. I mean, it may be that if you acknowledge your enemy as an enemy, you empower them. That seems very true. If you are identifying someone as your adversary and you're making it clear to that person that you see them that way, then they will probably see you the same way. I think it's probably better to try not to think of people as our enemies, even if they are our opponents in some way, or if they have hurt us or wronged us in some way, and try to see them, as not as enemies, but as bad friends.
Yeah. Very good. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?
Uh-huh.
Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
It's a good question. I guess one answer to it is you can do that. I mean, you don't have to be a consumer of art, and there are people who feel that way. I think who are not into, who see art as a passive experience. Sitting and reading or watching or
Yeah.
listening to something, and they feel like life is more about skiing down a mountainside, or doing rather than receiving. But I would I'm more the other direction. That yes, there's truth in fiction, that we expand our understanding of the world and ourselves and the other people in the world through art. It is true that there's many different kinds of art and creation and documentary stuff, very photorealistic drawings that are really just records of what is. That has its own very distinct value and beauty, and so does completely invented, more mannered things that seem less directly connected to the world we live in. Those are all valid forms. But somebody who says, "Well, why do we need this?" I would say, we don't necessarily need it. I think it helps. I
Yeah,
think artists can be. There's a real liability among artists. I see it in myself, and I see it in other artists, to be a little too precious about art.
yeah,
And I think that there's reasons for that, and it has its value, and especially in a context where you feel art or your art has been devalued, you'll tend to be a little extra precious about it. But whenever possible, I think it's good not to be too precious, and to
yeah.
think of art as as a form of work. It's something that we do um, because it's satisfying, because it gives us activity and purpose. But it's not necessarily better than teaching or medicine, or a million pursuits that are just as important to the people who pursue them.
No, brilliant. You really evoke two things I study all the time. One is Auden the poet said, the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. So me and you think, well, no, art is nurturing. We love it and it's good for us. But it could, in you're a comprehensivist. Well, there are people who agree with that as it's that's a passive experience. So that was really good. You open up, you're like, hey, I'm willing to hear even verbalize the other side rather than just go art, art, art. And then the joke is the kid gets to be the age where he figures out that his dad goes to work and does something. And his dad is an art teacher. And he goes, so dad, what do you do for your job? And he goes, I teach people how to draw. And the kid goes, you mean they forgot?
Ah, yes.
That is like, so walk us through, Noah, your tipping point in being, let's say, a writer, a performer, and a designer, whatever. You're a lyricist. You got four of them going strong. But let's just say right off, writer. Where you're growing up, you're reading. Where did you go? Oh, I want to do that. I want to research and write books. What's the tipping point? Like, what'd you study in college, high school and college that made you go, that's what I want to do?
Uh, my studies and the things that I've been interested in have mostly been either showbiz or literary subjects. So I've always have been interested from a you know early childhood in works of entertainment. Um, but I think I was a little earlier than most of my peers in realizing that, for example, the really interesting figure was not Luke Skywalker, but George Lucas, and not Kermit the Frog, but Jim Henson.
Really?
I, I
Wow.
had like an,
How'd you figure that out so early? Or
you
like
know,
what age are you seeing Star Wars and saying, "Hey, it's George Lucas, it's not."
really young. Like I was born in 1977, so my childhood was that 80s childhood. Star Wars, the Muppets, and I think one thing might just be that the names were always there. Like I had like a Muppet book, and it said Jim Henson's Muppets. Like, well, who's Jim Henson? And Star Wars, when during the first generation of Star Wars stuff, you know, the making of Star Wars was always as big a topic as the film itself. In fact, the hour long like documentary about how they did all the special effects that was on TV all the time, and the movie was not so easy to see in those days, before VCRs or
You should
anything.
watch the how to, yeah.
So we knew everything about George Lucas and how, how they
Well,
made
we
them.
meaning when you say we, you mean your peers?
Yeah, I
You're
think
the kids your same age, they weren't necessarily. Where'd you get that from? Your DNA and your parents, or more you? I mean, I know it's a stupid question, but what do you lean a little? 50-50 or a little more one or the other?
it's probably 50-50, but for whatever reason, I was the kid who would look at let's say, the Muppet book or poster and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, Jim Henson's Muppets. Well, who's Jim Henson? Like, this is all his? That's interesting." Like, I was interested in the creators of the stuff. Another kid might not have even thought about that and would be, keyed into some other detail.
Well, the
Um,
other question is, did you how many peers do you? I mean, how many siblings you have?
well, I have a younger brother and sister who I grew up with. They're both a few years younger than me.
Okay,
I also,
did they those two people have that in their sense a little or not? You were the unique one.
it's hard to say because they, especially in early childhood, were so influenced by me. You know,
Oh, you were the older
I
one.
was a very overbearing, director and producer of my siblings.
That is great. You had your cast there. By the way, did you ever see that first Jim Henson short film where his head's in the toilet and he's
Oh,
being
yes, yes.
that is what is the name of that film? Do you
I
know?
don't know. Yeah,
Uh,
but I've seen a
we
lot of that
saw
stuff.
that. We saw that in high school, and we were like, we didn't know we were seeing experimental film. That was an experimental film
Was
in a
that part of
way.
Timepiece? He made a film called
Yes,
Timepiece that was
I
like a
think it is Timepiece.
yeah,
Yeah,
that might have been what that's from, yeah.
but then you go to college. What do you start studying?
Well, I actually didn't totally go to college. By the time I finished with high school, you couldn't get me back in a classroom, and I did wind up being, variously enrolled, at 2 colleges, but I didn't take them very seriously, maybe to a fault. But, in high school and in my whole youth and ongoing adulthood, the things I've studied have mostly had to do with the theater, show business, the history of comedy. New
Yeah,
York City history is a big subject with me, and I've been a New York tour guide, and one of
yeah,
my shows and books is about New York history. The things that I've studied have tended to be under those columns.
yeah.
American history and politics. Um,
Then when did you say I can write song lyrics? What was the tipping point there? You're listening to all this great showbiz,
mhm.
American classic songbook, normal pop music. Where did you go? Oh, I can write songs. And do you write music and lyrics or just lyrics?
Well, I'm only a really good lyricist. I have also
Okay.
written it's often the way I would put it is that I have sometimes written tunes.
Yeah.
It's out of respect for real composers. I would never really call myself a composer, but some of the musicals that my often collaborator Amanda Sisk and I have written together, we would write songs and we would figure out basic chord patterns
Yeah.
for them. So we were writing more than lyrics.
Yeah.
But then we would turn those lead sheets over to an arranger who really did the work of the composer.
So where was that where you go, I can write lyrics?
Oh, I guess it
What's
was
the
just
tipping
from
point?
trying to do it. I always loved musicals and had an interest in musicals. Some of that also comes from the Muppets. It's an early exposure to sort of vaudeville style song and dance entertainment. But even beyond that, I always loved musicals and the Great American Songbook. I'd always gravitated toward old musicals and early jazz, which draws from the same catalog,
Yeah.
much more than to pop music of the age I was living in. And, the same way, like, looking at comic books made me think, oh, I bet I could draw something like this. And, it turns out, hey, I can draw. I think writing songs is the same way, just admiring lyrics and
You just
enjoying.
admired, so you became a graphic designer from looking at comic books.
I guess that's true. Yeah. Although I was a kid who liked to draw. Um, the graphic design career happened really accidentally from doing a lot of theater, and was producing shows downtown, and the show needs a poster or a logo, a title treatment, a website, and I like to do that stuff, so I might as well do that myself. I'll handle that and all the shows that.
You became a graphic designer out of necessity almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then, friends started, "Oh, will you do a poster for my show?" And,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
beautiful. Here's a crossover you might not know. The biggest influence on Hank Williams' lyric writing?
no.
Comic books.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Isn't that wild? For being one of the greatest American lyricists, he
Yeah,
got comic books.
but it makes perfect sense because comic book writing and lyric writing both call for concision. It's about using as few words as possible to say as much as possible and fitting it into a small space, a bubble or a line.
I'm going to do etymology on concision. That is a great word. I
Yeah.
need concision.
Yes, we all
Okay,
do.
Noah, a screenwriting teacher told me great artists when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a lyric, let's say? Not so much, you're writing, well, I know I'm writing a lyric for a musical, but, it's sort of just you're writing a lyric for a song.
Mm-hmm.
What role does intention play in that creative process?
A prominent role. I don't think there's a right or wrong dimension to this, and there's many ways to do it right. But
Yeah.
personally, I tend to be less of a inspired, listening to the muse, taking dictation from my soul kind of artist, and a more of an intentional, not necessarily storytelling, but point making kind of artist, and the songwriting that I've done has almost all been in the context of musical theater or other contexts where specifically this is a song that has to make these points and it's going to be about this. I guess what I'm saying is there's not a whole lot of deliberate self-expression in what I write, although inevitably it all is self-expressive. I'm not at this point as an adult. Was less true when I was younger, but I'm not as much a Dear Diary kind of artist.
You anticipate a question we're going to get to. Dear Diary artist. I like that. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're writing that lyric?
A lot. I mean, if I'm writing something for the theater, or for any performance medium, you think about the audience a lot, because especially in the theater, you're actually going to be there in that room, and you're going to know, and it's going to be very painful if you feel you're wasting their time or you're indulging yourself beyond the capacity of the audience to enjoy what you're doing. If your background is in the theater, you tend, I think, to be really tuned into audience. If I'm writing something that's more to be read on paper or on a screen that doesn't have to hang there in the room in time, then I might be a little, feel a little freer and looser to waste time, or just to indulge myself. And you think, well, they can skim this if they're not into it,
They can skim this. That's kind
nobody's got dinner
of
reservation.
I am. They go, yeah, that's too long. I go, so, well, then don't read that part. Like, I send an email and they go, your emails are too long. I says, well, just read the first sentence. I have to put a thing. You are not obliged to read the rest of this email. So then they go, well, I didn't read it because it was too long. Well, anyways, just skim it. That's good. Good advice.
Yes.
Look, Noah, this is fun. You really get it. Noah, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness or human sensorium, he would say. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangible like religion or philosophy could be an extension of consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's the
Mm.
pen or the keyboard, the same with your graphic design, whether you're using a pen, a pencil, a felt marker, or a mouse, what does that extend for you? What humanness?
Ah, what an interesting question. I would say it. My first thought is that those things extend one's voice,
Yeah,
that
great.
they're voice extenders.
Yeah. No, that's good. First thought, best thought. Yeah, it's funny because McLuhan says, "What does film extend?" And people go, "The eye or memory." And he goes, "No, it extends your foot because you're traveling."
Uh-huh.
But there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I love this Italian. He was so romantic. He says, "What is a pen poet, Italian poet? What does the pen extend for you?" He goes, "My tears."
Oh, but see, that's a beautiful answer.
What's the function of music?
Ah, oh boy. What is its function? It it expresses things that can't be expressed any other way, or at least not the same way. It invests time uh, with color and meaning. It's the most expressive and the most beautiful thing in the world, and it's one of the hardest things to talk about and to characterize in language, specifically for that reason. It's beyond language.
That is really, that's Gary Snyder, the poet, said the poet's task is to see the work of seeing the world without language, then putting that seeing into language.
Mm. Oh,
That's
that's really good.
that's kind of like what you're saying. You see the world without language, and then you put it into the language of music. So
Yes.
what's more fundamental, language or music?
Oh boy, more well, maybe language is more fundamental. I mean, you wouldn't want to live without music, but you probably could. Whereas language is as a tool for just getting our basic needs met, probably has more practical functions. Although music certainly has that too.
My friend says the three T's of music are theory, technique, and taste. Theory, you learn the structure; technique, you learn how to play it. How does one acquire taste?
Oh boy, I guess it can be acquired or it can be developed um, by through exposure to things. You develop taste by responding to what's around you. That's why it's important to be an audience and not just an artist. To get input in addition to output. You learn about taste based on what you like, and and I think it's a little bit um, making judgments about good and bad taste, although it's impossible not to do it a little bit. It's not very useful, and it can be inhibiting. It's the
Yeah,
same thing with making judgments about what is and isn't art.
yeah,
Like we need a definition at some point, or we can't talk about art. But by the same token, um, you don't want to be the guy walking through the museum saying like, "Well, that one's art, but that one's not." This one
yeah.
doesn't fit my definition.
Well, that's that great scene at the end of Lily Tomlin's
Oh,
soup,
soup and art.
soup art, soup art.
Yes.
McLuhan said song is slow down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
Huh.
Any comment?
It's definitely an interesting idea. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to find that was true. I mean, I haven't thought about this before, so these will be crude thoughts, crudely assembled response to that idea. But yeah, I mean, if you think about Eastern music, it seems to have something in common with the melody of Eastern languages. And the same is true of European music. I think it's true. It'd be interesting to, I guess, at some point, it's hard to separate music from the contexts in which we have heard it. Like to
Yeah,
me, Spanish music sounds Spanish and French music sounds French.
yeah,
But if you were experimenting on some poor child and put them in an isolation chamber and showed them like film footage of Spanish culture and played French music with it, uh, would they find that that it didn't seem to match up? Something is incongruous here, or would they
Right.
associate that music with that culture?
You're a smart guy, man. I appreciate that thought. That's really good. Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Oh, that does happen. Yeah. Rhapsody in Blue always makes me laugh, and other emotions too. There are things in Rhapsody in Blue that are so clever, they tickle you the same way wordplay can tickle you.
Isn't that amazing? That is so cool. And when you're writing a song, just in general, is there any way you integrate these four elements that Copeland said the four elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color?
Mm.
You're writing a lyric song. You're having some sense of you're going to give it to an arranger. But what of the four? Is there one, or are they all four equally being integrated? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color.
I would say that, although those are all equally important dimensions of music, I think from the point of view of a lyricist, melody and rhythm are the two,
Are the two? Wow,
because
not
they.
even harmony. That's good.
I mean,
Melody,
harmony is a very important in the way
or
we listen to music, but a lyricist doesn't really have to think about harmony that much. However, melody and rhythm, because they have to do with the emphasis of words and how words sit on music,
yeah,
and whether the flow of the lyric, feels natural and all that. Melody and
that's
rhythm have a
good.
lot to do with that.
That's good. Really good. Yeah, the Brill building songwriters, they go, what came first, the words or the lyric? And they go, the phone call.
Yeah, right. The contract. Yeah.
The contract, is that it? I always say the phone call.
In Merrily We Roll Along, which I just saw the current revival recently, so it's in my head. There's a scene where the songwriting team is being interviewed on a Good Morning America or something, and they get that question: "What comes first, the words or the music?" And the lyricist says, "Generally, the contract."
Ruth Draper has a great quote. The key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Sounds great. How do you do it? You're a performer.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's yes. Very often, I think it's about making people comfortable, um, making people comfortable, and then surprising them, making them feel like they know where something is going, and then throwing a curveball. I mean, that's how most humor works. Most jokes work that way. Most music that like strikes us and is memorable and compelling, it has to do with that same thing, setting up a certain expectation and then either topping our expectations or otherwise diverting them, or perhaps satisfying them, but in a with a prolonged gratification sort of way. That's usually what it is. But of course, that's sort of my experience and my sweet spot. But it would be just as valid for another artist to say the exact opposite. It's about making people uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of artists would say
Yeah,
that. It's about challenging people. You don't want them to feel any sense of gratification. You
yeah.
want them to be uncomfortable, and you want them to go home and not be able to go to sleep.
Wow. Well, Leonard Cohen says the only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk taking play in your creative process?
Oh, it plays a role. It's important for artists to take risks. Um, in the specific work that I've done, those risks have mostly had to do with like how you can really fall on your face trying to be funny if it's not working.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you have to commit to a joke or a piece of comic business. Um, and my great heroes are the Marx Brothers, and a lot of the work that I've done in and out of the theater has been in one way or another in tribute to the Marx Brothers, and they are like textbook examples of absolute fearlessness.
Yeah.
Um, or as Mel Brooks says, if you're going to walk up to the bell, ring it. Um, you know, they rang it,
That's a
and
good one.
to go charging out there dressed like that and be that obnoxious in a certain way is risky.
Yeah. That is a great Mel Brooks. I'm writing that one down.
Yeah,
If
if
you're
you're
gonna walk up to the bell, ring it. It's like it reminds me of the guy who plays what's his name? And the guy who plays Hitler in The Producers.
oh yes, Gary Beach, or in the
No,
original movie Kenneth Mars,
no, not
or
Kevin Bauer.
he's the
No,
playwright. Uh,
it's the guy who comes in and tries out
right.
Dick Richard. Anyways, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
He died on
Sean
stage
Dick Sean.
performing. He died on stage performing, and everybody thought he was acting.
Oh,
Like,
no kidding.
did he ring it, man? He rang it, all right.
Oh yes. Park Your Carcass too. Albert Brooks's father. I just saw that documentary. He died in the middle of a monologue at the Friars Club.
Park your carcass. What does that mean?
He was a comedian. That was his stage name. He did a Greek dialect character. Um, Einstein was his real name. He was Albert Brooks and Bob Einstein's father.
Oh, so you
And
mean his pseudo name was
his
Park?
Park Your Carcass was his
Oh
character.
my God,
He was
Albert
a radio star, and
Park your carcass.
yeah.
Well, Viola Spolin, an amazing woman. She was a social worker in Chicago, and she developed role playing exercises that spawned Second City and comedy improv. And her line is, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it.
Uh-huh.
What role does struggle have in your creative process?
Well, it plays a big part in my creative process. In my case, I would tend to, in most cases, hope the audience doesn't see it. I mean, this is another one of those things where there are multiple very valid answers that are
Yeah.
wildly contradictory. But I would say better for the audience not to see the sweat, and whether that's literal sweat on stage, or you could say that about a piece of writing too. Um, you know, Writing that feels very mannered and effortful, where you
Yeah.
feel like you can sort of see the writer sweating and trying very hard and trying to be impressive. And you can run the risk of preciousness. On the other hand, Art Spiegelman, who's a hero of mine, he has said, and it's a really good point, that you have to be willing to risk pretentiousness. And,
Yeah.
the fear of being pretentious can stand between an artist and great work.
Wow. What's another word for being pretentious?
Uh, Precious,
Oh,
maybe,
precious.
yeah, self glorifying. I mean, there is a self glorifying quality just to the having the presumptuousness to
Yeah.
create art and ask people to sit and receive it, from you. It is, it's a little obnoxious to begin with. So, and I mean, there are certainly some artists who that's exactly what it is. We pay money to go and sort of worship and admire them. The rock star
Yeah.
model, is
It
about that.
it goes back to when I open the dialogue we have on thinking, I don't really go through all these think quotes. And really, my favorite is the two Marx brothers. I go, we got to think. And he goes, no, we already tried that. What's the function of laughter?
Oh, oh boy. What is the function of laughter? It has many functions. An important one is that it's a kind of like inarguable honesty. Laughter is one of the very few completely involuntary responses that people have. I mean, it's really, there's not a lot of things like that. There's laughter, there's tears, and there are sexual responses. But where like our bodies do things really largely without our permission in response to stimuli. And we reveal a lot about ourselves with what we laugh at, especially what we truly laugh at. You know, there's of course a difference between the polite chuckle that where you do it to acknowledge that someone is trying to be funny, and the real laughter that we just can't help.
Boy, that's an amazing observation, honesty. McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen, behind every joke, there's a grievance. Any comment?
Yeah, it's probably reasonably true, or as true as a generalization like that can be. Behind every
Yeah.
joke, yeah, most jokes are probably based on, if not grievance, they're based on dissociations, on tension between our expectations and reality. Yeah, a good friend of mine, a director named West Hyler, once said, "Behind every joke, there's some humor."
you know, there's some humor. Uh, See, that's what I'm for. Is aphorisms are fine and dandy, but it's about rewording them. That's where you take it one step further,
Mhm.
because you can get enlightenment from an aphorism and just settle for that. But then, how can you take it farther?
Yes, yes, or just change one little thing. I mean, a lot of jokes are about that. Just
That's the
something the most
yeah,
prosaic imaginable thing, but you just change one little detail
little
to
thing.
change it.
Well, yeah, Gurdjieff said it really well. I thought he said laughter's the reconciliation of yes and no.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And I asked my friend who wrote comedy with Mork and Mindy and Robin Williams. I said, "Can satire be destructive?" And he says, "That's the job of satire." Now, if me and you do a cartoon in another country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. But Swift, Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the fun?
Oh,
Yeah. What's the function of satire?
oh man, satire. George Kaufman said satire is what closes on Saturday night. Uh, it's really tricky, you know. I've swum in the waters of satire a lot, and for many years, Amanda Sisk and I did these political musicals. That was my main theatrical activity, from the early 2000s to the beginning of the Obama years, and we spent a lot of time thinking about satire and effective ways to do it and what its function is. The Anybody who does political satire will always hear the phrase "preaching to the choir," and you hear that a
Oh,
lot. Ah, you're preaching to the choir. Why would anyone who is really available to be convinced of what you're saying attend your political musical? You know, um, and the answer to that accusation, it's not mine. I don't know who coined it, but when you're accused of preaching to the choir, a good response is to say, well, that's how you make them sing. And so that's what we would say. Yes, we're preaching to the choir. That's how you make them sing. You're not actually trying to convince the people who don't agree with you. You're trying to mobilize the people who do agree with you, but aren't engaged, aren't activists. Um, that is probably a more realistic goal for satire. Um, Tom Lehrer, who is another one of my all-time great heroes and unquestionably a very great satirist. Um, he has always been in interviews, a great naysayer to the idea that satire can really affect change. He talks about the great satirical cabarets of Weimar Germany that were so effective in curbing the rise of Hitler and Nazism. Satire has always been ringing out loud and clear when governments collapse and freedoms are taken away. And I do think there's real danger of like feeling like you're doing the work of an activist when what you're really doing is the work of a commentator. I think artists are, although it's great to be an activist and artists should be involved and engaged, I think more likely, if you're an artist, your role is closer to being a commentator than an activist. And satire is probably, if it has a practical function, it's probably that, opening people's minds to new ways of looking at things. I don't think the dictator's really going to step down because we make fun of him.
Yeah. Really well put there, man. I'm doing a whole research project on all that, and you just like summarized all my punchlines perfectly. Thank you. You scripted it out well there, Noah. Really good. How to make them sing. That's good. Because Cindy Sheehan, she protested
Yes.
before in the Bush's front yard, and she says, "We're just preaching to the choir, and there ain't even a choir."
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
really that I repeat that all the time. And Jean-Luc Godard told Michael Moore that his film was going to help Bush get elected, and it didn't help Bush get elected, but it galvanized pro-Bushers. And all the great political docs we see on PBS and movie theaters now, do they more satirize? Do they more activate or pacifize? Yeah, it's a bunch of yuppies sitting and go, "That's what I believe," and then they don't do anything. They're like, "Yeah, that right on, brother. I can dig that." But
Yes, right. There's something about that.
yeah,
The comedian who wants to be agreed with more than laughed at.
yeah,
Uh, like a certain style of comedy where the audience applauds when they agree rather than laughing when they're amused.
yeah. It's a really good point. And Utah Phillips, a labor activist and folk singer, said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Hmm. Um, I guess the rules can mean so many things. Like my love of iconoclastic comedy and figures like Groucho Marx. It makes me feel like I'm an opponent of the rules, and the rules should be broken, and we should disregard the rules. But actually, as a member of like a very complicated functioning society, I think there are forms of rules that are really important, that are the basis of like keeping a civilization going. And uh, that like the in general, I think the important rules have to do with how we treat other people, and like you must be very careful not to hurt people, physically or emotionally or in any way, try not to make anybody's day worse, try to make people's day better if you possibly can. Um, I feel I've wandered from the question here.
Yeah, but
Those
no,
are those are
it's
the
good you
important rules.
covered. I'm for wandering and in stories, anecdotes, diversions, tangents. It's all good, but it's sort of a stupid question. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Who's entitled?
I've struggled with the verb because the verb doesn't sound right. Who makes the rules? Well, the rules are made by the rich, but no, who's entitled to make the rule? Well, we're all entitled to make the rules. So it's like it's a question I've struggled with. How do you word it? Who should
Yeah.
make the rules? Who's entitled to make? People have advised me just keep the word entitled.
Mhm.
But it's sort of a complicated question if like because who makes the rules. It's not really that we don't live in a democracy, we live in a plutocracy. But
Mhm.
there's some rules that you and your community vote on, and then it's like, where's the money going for this education or for this road repair? So there is, you know,
Yes, I am a fan of civilization, and I want civilization to thrive, and I
yeah,
want people to, be happy and productive and have lives in cities with other people, and millions of mini systems have to thrive in order for all that to happen. So, I mean, I think although there's often great injustice and it's often done badly by bad people, but I think our elected representatives are entitled to make rules according to the system we have for passing laws. We're entitled to rebel against laws that we don't think are just and try to have them overturned. And there are very flawed systems for all of those things. But if you're talking about rules in a like aside from in a law and order sense,
yeah,
uh, I think mm, we're entitled to make our own rules,
Yeah.
to the extent that we don't hurt other people.
Yeah. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, it's another one of these. They're both very important, aren't they? Tonight, I'll say compromise. I mean, on another night, I might say conviction. It certainly is important to have convictions. I mean, it's important to have both. It's important to feel things strongly and have strong opinions. It's also important to be able to bend with the road a little bit in order to live happily in civilization with other people.
Yeah, no, I want people to just answer these questions, use prompts, and talk. But there is a tendency, I have a bias. I want to hear people say certain answers. And I love it when people say compromise. So there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. You've accomplished a lot in these. How do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third, in your accomplishments?
Oh boy. I'm tempted to say luck is the most important of those three things. I mean, I haven't always had good luck, and I certainly would like to have more and better luck. But I think the good things have been, not wholly, but largely about luck, or luck made them possible. Um, Between skill and ambition, I think I would put I think ambition might be a little more important than skill. These are somewhat counterintuitive answers, and I think at an earlier time in my life, I would have answered the opposite way. But the older I get, and the more experience, and the more time goes by, and the more I think about these things, I really do think luck and attitude, and a certain kind of being somewhat at peace with the uncertainty of everything, is actually much more important than things that when I was younger I would have spoken much more reverently about, like talent and self-expression. Those
Yeah.
things are important, but um, is it? This is another great quote, and I can't remember who said it. Some I think playwright said, a writer. There are three things for a writer to have: observation, imagination, and experience. And you can do without any one of those things, but you can't do without two of them.
Wow, can't do without two. That's good. And another great quote is the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Oh, yes, right. Yes,
That's that's what
that's very true. I hesitate to go too far down a power of positive thinking kind of road. And I don't think we can exactly will things to happen with our minds, but it really is true that if you try to affect a cheerful and confident attitude, you will probably have a slightly more cheerful and confident experience.
yeah, that's it's also I love Warhol saying, "Don't worry about what people think about your art, just keep making it."
Yeah.
And that's what it seems to me. You are just constantly cranking this stuff out. In regards to critics too, I love Sam Goldwyn. He says, "As for the critics, don't even ignore them." A poet said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, I would say my inner dialogue is partly musical. Um, music. Let's go with
Good,
music once
good.
again. Decision. That'll be my answer. Music.
No, you touched on this one, but I'm
Song. That's the answer. Not music, but song.
song.
Yes,
That's
song.
good. Yes, that's good. Um, you touched on this already, but two of my film heroes say, "Ignore yourself." Jonas Mika says, "There is no self expression." Cecil Taylor says, "I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me." Is art making, songwriting, more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Um, in my case, the latter. But I don't think there's a universal truth to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in my case, I tend, I think I do good work when it's in the service of a specific telling a specific story, making a specific point, realizing a specific vision. For me, that's what works. And I think I've arrived at that because I've tried it the other way. Um, you know, um, of just sort of trying to sort of rip your heart open and put it all down on paper and write impressionistically and just take dictation from the muse and express what you're personally feeling about your personal life. Many people have created great art that way. It's not a bad way to go, but personally, my stuff that way tends to not be as inspired, I think, as the stuff I write out of a sense of like, to take an example in my book, Love Marches On, like I had a specific story I wanted to tell. I wanted to write about a specific place and a specific culture. And, you know, it was about delivering this set of ideas, and inevitably on the way to doing that, I also expressed a great deal of my, most personal thoughts and feelings and, revealed a lot about myself and expressed things that I feel deeply. But the actual purpose was not about that. It was about like this set of characters and a story that will express, you know, this set of ideas that I want to work with.
Can art making be egoless?
I don't see why not. It probably rarely is, but I think it can be.
Is perception reality?
Ah, um, not necessarily, but to the person to the perceiver in question, it might as well be.
Yeah. Tell me one major element of your creativeness that has remained the same and one major element that's changed.
Um, One thing that has remained the same is the sort of joy, the peaceful joy and drive to do it. Just the sense of feeling like you're at home when you sit down to write something or play music or create something visually. Just the sense of like, oh, this is really what I do. The way
Yeah.
someone who loves to cook feels in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's been a constant my whole life. And something that's changed is the thing we were just talking about. I mean, it's changed. It's not a recent change, but on the road from being 16 to being 46, I've in some ways I've developed a more. This sounds cold, and I don't mean it that way, but in some ways a more cerebral approach, a more deliberate approach. And creativity for me is not as much about like, hey, look what I can do. Not so much about like, this will be my way to get attention and this will be my way to sort of have a role in the world. And more a matter of like, this is what I do, more
Like,
like,
was it like you honed your craft?
yeah, I suppose. Although it's not so much about the quality of the work. Hopefully, the quality of the work is good, but it's separate from value judgments about the work itself. But it's like I said, like I want to tell this story.
Yeah.
I want to give an audience this experience.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh boy, yeah, I know there's many of these. What's a specific example? Um, Well, okay. We talked earlier about dancing. You know,
Right.
uh, like a one. Although I am, among other things, a performer, and I've done a lot of stage work, and I love that. I mean, it's one of the more fun things that I do. But I am physically awkward. I mean, I'm aware of that as a human being. I'm a little bit physically awkward, and that can be a real valuable asset
Yeah.
in comedy.
Yeah.
And I have found, particularly in my performances as Groucho Marx, which is over the last 10 years, most of the time, not all, but most of the time I've spent on stage has been as Groucho. I have found that, he was physically awkward too, in a way. And I figured out how to sort of map my physical awkwardness onto his, and, use uh, the awkwardness that I would feel playing a different kind of role, and put it in the service of Groucho.
Dude, I want you to come to LA sometime and meet my wife's partner, Brad Kay. He's, they both specialize in that 20s to 40s music. They're
Yeah.
really
Oh,
good.
yeah.
They're really good. I'm going to send you a couple songs they've done because I think you would love it in the
Oh,
great
yeah.
great tradition. In he's had encounters over the years with a lot of people. And the Groucho one is amazing because he's at a party and he meets Groucho and somehow he says, "Oh, I can back you on Lydia, the tattooed lady." And he says, "Okay, let's do it." And he didn't know, like to ask him the key, and he just knew the key from the album, and he just nailed it.
Oh,
So I
wow.
mean, what a great little story of meeting Groucho and playing a song with them at a party.
Wow. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Ah, when it motivates us to do good things, and
Yeah.
it can do that.
Yep. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
This answer may be a cop out, but my answer is the most significant difference between men and women is the way they're treated.
The way they're treated. That's not a cop out. The way they are treated. That's amazing. No, it's the cliche as everybody says women are emotional, men are linear, blah, blah, blah. So that was good.
Yeah, I,
There's,
te- I tend to reject those things. There may be
I
a
know.
little bit of truth to some of those things, but I don't know. It seems like they are not worth. They've caused more trouble. They've done more harm than good. Those gender
Yep.
generalizations.
Yep. And, guess what? I love it when someone goes, there is none.
Mhm.
They just like say, but there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate.
Mm.
James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. So I'm just curious your thought on this line. Not you, Noah, but one creates what one resists. You create what you resist. What's your thought on that line?
It sounds to me like it's probably true. I mean, it sounds like that's probably an unfortunate truth, but I'll bet there's a lot of truth to it. Yeah, but to dig into it more specifically, do we create what we resist? Yeah, because maybe in some ways our pronounced dislikes, the things that we feel militant against, and that really make us feel a powerful sense of rejection. It's because it's a little personal for us in some way, and the qualities that we are fighting to suppress in ourselves are the qualities that we're most likely to be bothered by when we see them in other people. So like if I am concerned that I talk too much, I'm going to be really sensitive to other people if I feel like they are ramblers.
Yeah.
So according to the same logic, yeah, I'll bet to some extent we probably do um, become what we resist, or we're always on a, we're always on a fulcrum and tipping uh, toward and away from being our own worst nightmares.
Yeah, we get about 5 more minutes, and I got a few more questions. Can you go a little more?
Yeah,
10.
sure.
Okay, great. Thanks. Alan Watts, 5 questions, just off the top of your head in a couple words. One, who started it all?
Who started it all? George M. Cohan.
Nice. Are we going to make it?
Yeah, we're gonna make it.
3, where do we put it?
Oh, you want to put it in an airtight package and mail it overnight.
4, who's cleaning it up?
We're cleaning it up.
5, is it serious?
Yes, I'm afraid it's very serious.
Putting in the airtight package just begs for, we're doing a research project on archive. The word archive comes from 1400s, keep safe, free from harm. 1600s, records preserved as evidence. So, the Eastern philosophy is be here now, live in the moment. In fact, Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. And the Egyptians put stuff in their coffin with them. Why do we have to archive if we're supposed to be living in the moment? And, this is great coming from you because you know how important archives are, that you can go to these libraries and these archives. And what was that place where you said you could sleep in it? I loved it. Like where was Groucho's papers kept?
Yeah, that was at the Smithsonian.
Smithsonian. Like, I mean, if that didn't exist, but the futurists said burn all libraries and, museums, which I think is a brilliant idea, but I don't want them to do that. I like that artists thought that up. So the 2 questions are, is archiving more innate or more invented? Just talk about this idea of humans archiving. And do you have specific plans for your archives? I imagine you have a pretty dang good archive there. Just looking at your walls, do you have a plan, or do you just figure your loved ones are going to go, oh yeah, take care of this? Do you have a plan for your archives?
Oh boy, interesting questions. Yeah, I think that is definitely a human instinct, isn't it? Or at least an instinct that many humans have to
Yeah.
save things and catalog them. Whether it's letters, greeting cards, a lot of that kind of ephemera is digital now, but we still save them. And yes, and then in a sort of higher or broader societal way, there are people who feel strongly compelled to save newspapers or
Well, the masters,
political
just
ephemera.
just to interrupt, because you said digital, if people just go, well, I put on digital. Well, you put on a hard drive, you have to check the hard drive once a year and replace the hard drive every 7 years,
Yeah.
according to the great archivist. And what if they turn the internet down? Then everything's gone. So, save the masters,
Yes.
save the originals is a key point in archiving. If they just scanned all that Groucho stuff and threw it out, boy, would you like to dumpster dive that dumpster,
Yeah,
But
though that's very true. Yeah.
yeah, and stuff is still being found that people find that Groucho or Marx Brothers or whatever your research, well, the history of New York City. I mean, every
Oh,
day
yeah.
tons is thrown out into landfills.
Well, it's amazing to be at like a place like the Smithsonian or the New York Public Library, and you think like, I'm here to read the letters of Jack Benny or something, but they've
Yep.
also got the letters of Abraham Lincoln back there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. But do you have a specific plan for your own, or do you have yours in an archive?
There's a little bit of that. This is something I've been thinking about more and more, as I age, that I do need more of a plan than I have. Yes, it's certainly a concern for artists, but I guess for everybody. I should have more of a plan than I do. A lot of that, a lot of that stuff, I think of as part of the goal of publishing like it. I mean, and to some extent, to think anything is terribly permanent, maybe foolish. But I always feel like having books in print, that'll still be available when I'm no longer around is one way of, not living on, but
But preserving your legacy, is that the word you want to put?
yeah, or at least finding a way to continue to contribute to people's experiences, after I'm no longer around. I think it's one of those artist preciousness risks, and you don't want to confer upon yourself some kind of immortality because you wrote a book. On the other hand, I do feel some sense of satisfaction knowing, for example, that, as long as people are interested in the Marx Brothers, people who are like determined to learn everything they can about the Marx Brothers are going to find my book, after I'm gone, and my thoughts will be part of their experience of the Marx Brothers,
Yeah.
and there's many other subjects that I'd like to, be public about for the same reason, and it is a way of not living on, but it's a way of continuing to be an important part of other people's experience.
Yeah. How do you find peace of mind?
Um, hmm. I personally find it partly through my marriage. I'm one of the lucky people who's married to my best friend, and at the center of my life is this very close, very important connection with one specific other person.
Right.
And, that is, figuratively speaking, a place I can go to and um, feel both needed and like my needs are being met. It's a place where I can feel like a connection and responsibility. I can't go off the deep end because that would have terrible implications for my partner. That would hurt her. I have to stay. That kind of thinking. Um, and another thing that gives me peace of mind is just the familiar embrace of the cultural stuff that I love,
Yeah.
favorite music, films, those are also places I can visit for a glimpse of what's good in the world.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Mm. Uh, I think I would say relax.
Nice. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over the top. It should come over the top, but I can still be friends with people who have the opposite opinion.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh, I was once asked this question and I gave a glib, facetious answer. I'll give you the same one. The answer was, "He taught us how to love."
Oh, that's good. And they want to scent the glue and the binding. What smell?
Oh, hmm, gardenia.
That's Billie Holiday, man. Way to go. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, I would like it to be in Times Square, and I think it should be made of. It should be a bronze. It should be a traditional bronze, very heroic statue.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Huh. Uh, I, there's probably a travel answer to this question. I know travel is good for you. It's really important that people travel, and it expands your world and it gives you a broader sense of things. And I just wish I enjoyed it more. I'm a very reluctant and resistant traveler, and I know I'm missing out. And it's embarrassing how few physical places I've been to.
Dude, I'm 70, and the last thing I want to do is get in airplanes and
Yeah.
travel. It's like, give me a break. This is too, but I don't. Good answer. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do? Yeah.
I would say, what would I do? What would I do? God, you hope that if you're in a situation like that, that you have a clever line ready to go. You know, you want to know that you have something ready. Up to your neck in vomit. See,
That's good. You hope you have a clever line. That's a great answer. No, I've never had that.
you
You
would
went,
say you would
yeah, go
say something like, "I asked for medium rare."
ahead. That's like Ernie Kovacs. I'm on TV, medium rare. That
Yeah,
is good. Yeah, because one of my favorite is I would. What would you do? They said I wouldn't be in a situation like that.
yeah,
But
right.
I wish you could have met the guy who taught me that. He used to hang out in New York City, and he was Damon Runyon like, but he
Uh-huh.
married, and he used to hang out on the Venice boardwalk, and he was just the coolest old dude. He was an altacocker, the best. And he basically taught me that question, and people go, ugh, and it's really like that's life in a way. You're in a bad bomb, and people are throwing bags of shit at your face. Like, what do you
Yeah.
do?
My father used to tell a story about when he was a teenager. He had a terrible cold, and he'd be like hacking, phlegm into a handkerchief, and he was like at a restaurant or something, and he was impressing his friends, and like doing this gross out young boy behavior, and like holding the handkerchief at arm's length and
Yeah.
hawking loogies the length of his arm. And that in a terrible turn of events, he missed and hit a guy in the next booth, like a
Oh,
horrible, disgusting ball of phlegm. And it
right.
like hits the guy like on the shoulder or something. And my father, in horror, like, what is this man going to do to me? And that the guy just kind of looked at it. He took a napkin, he wiped it off, and he said, "Good shot." So maybe
that
that's the answer.
that's beautiful. Good shot. Yes. Beautiful. I love that. Okay. What's the cultural shift? Good shot. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Huh. Well, I do. It sounds like a very cliched answer, but I do find the kids inspiring. I
Yeah.
don't have children myself, but whenever I'm exposed to young people,
Yeah.
I usually come away feeling pretty happy and more hopeful about the world than I do when I'm just knocking around with my crowd. And the in the Marx Brothers part of my work. Um, Getting young people interested in older stuff, older films and older theater and music, that tends to play a pretty big role in a lot of those efforts, because the only way this stuff is going to last is if younger people are interested in it. And although fans of vintage entertainment tend to, for some reason, they really seem to enjoy saying that kids don't care about this stuff. It's almost like protecting their own sense of having this exclusive domain, like
Yeah.
saying like the kids don't understand this, only we understand this.
Yeah.
And it leads to an unfortunate kind of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
But I have had very good luck exposing kids and teenagers to vintage comedy in my little corner of the world. I think, I think young people are open minded, and they are also living in a world where access is just, you know, way beyond what even I ever dreamed of. I mean, when I was a child and I realized that I was interested in the Marx Brothers, it took me years to see all their movies,
Yeah.
just to track them down and see them. And it was harder before, the generation before me and before that generation had an even harder time. It is unlikely that a young person today hears about the Marx Brothers, but if they do, boy, is it easy for them to, you know, and the Marx Brothers is the example I'm using because of my own stuff, but any artist who's
Yeah.
published anything in the last century, or before, if you know to look for them, they're right there for you now. And
Yeah.
that's
No, you can
a
find
beautiful thing.
TikToks and 5 to 10 minute tutorials on Marx Brothers, Three Stooges, W.C. Fields, Buster Keaton, and that's what kids watch. They watch 3 to 5 minutes, and it's amazing how many videos there are that are like whoop, and
Yeah.
they capture a lot. I love to watch those little clip of 8 great Groucho lines in a row. It's like wow,
Yeah.
and uh, I
And the
have to.
same is true with Shakespeare and Picasso and
Oh yeah,
Shostakovich, and I mean, it's all
and
so available. That's a
I,
huge
I
advantage.
I have to tell you, I come from the Frank Zappa world big time, and I worked for him for 10 years. And they go, "So are you the Marx Brothers of rock?" And he goes, "No, we're more like the Three Stooges of rock."
Oh, well, one of my favorite lines is people often ask about compare those two teams, and I
Yeah.
always like to say um, comparing the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges is like comparing Shakespeare and the Three Stooges.
That's good. Yeah, when you find a woman, I mean, this is sexist, but it's my pattern I've recognized. If you find a woman who likes Frank Zappa, it's like finding a woman who likes the Three Stooges curly episodes only.
Few and far between.
Yeah. Um, and by the way, that's the answer I get the most, which is inspiring. The cultural shift you see developing today is youth, the
Mhm.
young. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Oh, it's the question of the struggle of the artist. The tension between the time that we have to spend making a living and the time that we need in order to create art, uh, away from the uh, burdens and pressures of making a living. The time, money, work equation,
Yeah.
for any artist who doesn't have the advantage of independent wealth. Um, and I think particularly if your artistic goals, I, I've always been the kind of artist who doesn't try too hard, doesn't make commercial success the goal, although I, even while desperately wanting it,
Yeah.
you know, but trying not to make artistic decisions based on it. And it's really hard to do. And you wind up,
Yeah.
as I do, and I think as most artists do, with a fairly small amount of your precious time really available for creativity.
Two lines you evoked there is Al Flipside, the punk magazine that spawned everybody, including Matt Groening. He said, "Don't sell out, sneak in."
Mm.
And then Paul Schrader wrote Taxi Driver says, "The role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail."
Oh, that is good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, Noah, but to a point, it's like, well, my art is so pure and precious that I tried to sell out, but I failed. I mean,
Yeah.
you can look at it that way, but the other way is, no, I tried to, cater to that, the definition of what, what you're doing when you're writing a musical. There's a form to it. And you don't want to change the form too much because it already works in that form, you
Well,
know.
it's like if you change the form, great, nothing wrong with that, but
Right.
it shouldn't be the specific goal.
Goal.
It should be
That's
more
right.
like on your way to making this point or telling this story or providing this experience the way you want to, you wound up stumbling upon an innovation. That's the way to do it.
That is amazing. You got to hear this. This is my theory on Preston Sturgis and Frank Zappa. What they are is alchemists. They took two known things, put them together, and invented a third unknown thing. They didn't know they were doing this. Like Frank invented theatrical rock, Preston Sturgis, whatever, writer, director, screwball comedy. Then they satirized their new thing.
Yes.
They didn't just say, "Oh, I invented," I'm proud I kind of invented a new thing. They satirized it.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah,
really that's true.
yeah,
Yes, you could definitely make that argument about lots of great artists.
yeah. A lot of great artists
Yeah.
have done. Yeah. How has art making and all your writing, graphics, lyricist, how has it shaped your behavior?
Oh, in many ways, but largely because of the thing I was just talking about, just what it does to your time management needs.
Yeah,
I tend to be, and many creative people this is true of. I tend not to have a whole lot of recreational activity in my
yeah,
life. I have the job that pays the bills. I have the marriage and friendship that means so much to me, and also friends and family, the people who matter to me. What little time is left, that's my time to be an artist. So I tend not to have a lot of what you would consider hobbies.
yeah.
Like I said, I don't do a lot of travel. I don't play or follow sports. I don't have a bustling social life, except when one crops up along the production of a play, or the realization of a project.
Well, that's a line I would say to students sometimes: get your life and your job as mixed up as possible.
Yeah.
So you're not like, oh, now I'm working now. Okay, two more and we're out of here. This has really been fun and enlightening, Noah. Thank you so much for your time.
My
This,
pleasure.
this is Thornton Wilder in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Hmm. Um, I guess the answer is it probably the true answer is what uh, uh, Richard Burton, I think it was Richard Burton or Laurence Olivier, told Dick Cavett when Cavett asked him, "What motivates you to be an actor?" And he said, "Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me."
Yeah.
That's probably it deep down.
Wow, way to go. Look at me. That could be the whole thing about the question I forgot to ask you is what is the motive of the cave artist?
Oh yeah, right.
Cuz is it any different than what you're doing or what we're doing now? Is it really any different? You know,
Yeah,
and
in some
they're like,
fundamental way, it's
yeah.
not.
But I mean, I should ask you, what is the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch or your guess? Is it the same as look at me, or is it?
I don't know. I mean, I can think of answers that would satisfy that question, but I don't know that any one of them would always be the right answer. I mean,
Yeah,
but two answers that seem immediate are maybe the goal of the cave artist is to document,
yeah,
and maybe the goal of the cave artist is to express.
yeah,
It could also be both of those things. Oh, and then
yeah,
it can also be just dawdling, just filling
yeah,
time, doodling.
yeah,
It's just an activity.
yeah. What gives you the most optimism?
Um, I guess it's unrealized hopes, and um, the hope of realizing them in the future. The things that I'm excited about seeing and doing, and wanting there to be a future where the world and I are both doing well enough that those
Yeah,
things can happen.
yeah. Well, how fun, Noah. This is great. I've learned a lot. And I'll tell you the first question is what's the best thing for a human being? I got that from Wilhelm Reich. He said the best thing for a human being is another human being.
Oh, that's a good answer too.
And
Yes.
the question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life was, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Yeah.
So it's really been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Noah. Thank you so much.
That's been really a pleasure to talk to you, Jerry. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends so we can keep talking forever and ever.
Sounds good.
All right, see you, Noah. Thank you.
Thank you.